Here's a good question. Did you take your kids to work with you? Well, yeah, I did. And I'll tell you why and how after I make this statement. Please, whenever I talk about parenting things, don't ever conclude from what I say about family and parenting the one size fits every family when it comes to parenting. There just really is no perfect parenting formula. There's no perfect schooling formula. Every parent is different. Every child is different. Every job is different. Every crisis is different. But there is one practice that I do recommend for every family. Try to get as much time with each other before everyone is gone. I mean, it goes by so fast when you have children at home. Try to get all the time with them that you can. So, okay, back to your question. I just saw the stat that 4 out of 5 American families intend to home educate starting right now. Others will be told by the school system to just keep their children at home for online public education. So if you're a working parent, what in the world is this going to look like? Will you be working from home to accommodate, this new world? Or can one or two of your children sometimes go to work with you and into work at some point, sometime, some days when it just has to happen? I believe that because this is such a new period for everybody, employees, employers, children, I think a whole new culture of kids at the workplace will be a thing. It will be developing with rules of etiquette and expectation. Some kids really are simply going to show up with a parent to the workplace on some days for a whole lot of different reasons. And those different workplaces may be able to make that new situation work really well if they can maintain a culture of professionalism and work. Workplaces are workplaces. They're not places where kids can just show up during the day and do nothing or goof off or distract people. So if a child shows up with mom or dad, the entire place needs to expect that child to be quietly working, just like all the other people, working at his reading, his studying, his writing. And when this happens, children will not be a horrible liability or a distraction or a problem. But, okay, what if the child is undisciplined and unruly? Well, I think it's just simple. If the child won't grow up and apply some self-control, he just simply can't come into that disciplined work environment. He needs to be banned. It just needs to be off limits to him. Other children who've proven themselves to be cooperative and helpful, willing to follow the rules of this place, I can see them being quite welcome at a workplace. And the parent's going to have to, if the child is just simply too disobedient and unruly, the parent will have to just cough up money to hire someone to watch that child someplace else. Now, I think one thing we'll see developing too, maybe even on streets near you, are these entrepreneurial little schools opening up where kids can go and dive into free online curriculum like the Khan Academy and start giving themselves a really broad base of knowledge. And maybe that's an alternative or an option for you if you just absolutely have to be at a place of business, at a place of work, and it doesn't work to take your child in there. And so every change in an economy, which like the ones we're going through right now, and there are many changes, it seems like almost every week, these open up new entrepreneurial opportunities. In fact, if you look at it carefully, you may be able to make more money watching other parents' kids than you do at your current job. So maybe this is a new opportunity for you to look at. If there's no other way to make the current situation work, what about a new situation? A new creative situation that you come up with your family, working together, maybe with your boss to try to figure out how this is going to work. So back to your question, did I take my children in? Yeah, I did. And let me tell you how I made a go of it. When my children were very young, I always tried to take them with me everywhere I went, whether it was to work or whether it was running errands. And in those early days of having children, I wasn't seeing them very much. I was locked into a corporate kind of job where it wasn't very conducive to bring them in. They were really young at that point, 3, 4, 5 years old. And I was at the office a lot. I wasn't addicted to work, but I was driven to do an awful lot, to create, to fight the bad guys in the culture wars. And I loved what I was doing, but I knew that I needed my own business for creativity and for flexibility. And so I finally did make the leap. I started a business, an independent business that let me work anywhere I wanted. I could work from home about 85% of the time, but as a consultant, I still had meetings with human beings. And in my case, it was often with really high-level decision makers like congressional leaders, think tank officials, policymakers, and the people who really get things done behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. Just a sort of a place for a 7-year-old, right? Well, yeah, it turned out to be. So our family at that time lived right outside D.C. in the country. And every time I had non-confidential meetings in the city, I tried to take one or two of my children with me, usually one, but sometimes two. And I was the only adult in the capital I knew who was doing this on a regular basis, especially with children as young as 7, 8, or 9. In some meetings, this arrangement wasn't very well received for the first 10 minutes or so. People resented what they thought or what they were sure was going to be this really messy, noisy, unprofessional train wreck of a meeting. But about 20 minutes into the meeting, they could see that the children could be professional and quiet and considerate and focused, and sometimes even intelligently interested in what was being said. Now, most of the time, the meetings were not interesting to my children, so they just stayed happily and quietly focused on their books. So what were they working on? It was mostly reading, learning, more reading, lots of reading, and reading is what helped them learn to really love true learning, real learning, and it still does now that they're adults. They're still voracious readers and students. So back to your question, did I take them to work? Yeah. And people there at these meetings would often catch me afterward and say, excuse me, how do you get them to be so compliant? And I would say, well, let me answer that. We really actually don't want them to be compliant. That's what the government wants of children. The public schools do all this really complex behavior manipulation, mass psychology kind of stuff. What we want for our children is for them to be voluntarily interested in life and voluntarily and cheerfully obedient. And so we work with them at home so that they know how that works, what it's supposed to look like, and what it's supposed to look like for them to be considerate of other people in a room, even strangers. So yes, I did take them to work in public. And I also, of course, took them deep into my home office where creative things were happening. And they were able to learn a lot about a work ethic, a work environment, about initiative, about being self-governing in a place where you've got no boss but yourself. And they learned about deadlines and stress and contracts and diplomacy. As they got older, I could teach them these things. They learned about the tools of modern business. And so we also worked together, okay, not just in that, but on many other things, because we did live in the country on purpose. We worked together on outdoor building projects for all kinds of things, for goats, for chickens, for gardens, and of course, gathering firewood for the winter. And it was good to be able to do both of those things with them, and then also to let them see the real world, go places with their father, meet interesting people with their father. And so, as you're thinking about this, what is the best kind of job for working with your children? Well, not all of us will ever get to have the very best and most ideal arrangement for children. But I think if I had to pick, if you pin me down, I think I would have to say farming is probably the most ideal place and way and profession and vocation for children to be growing up around. They can be given so many valuable jobs as really young children, as young as 5. They can learn lots about how to handle really heavy responsibility by age 10, by age 13, or age 14. If a boy can be doing man-sized work, and he can be at that age, and he can be doing it on his own without direct supervision. Daughters can be helping mom at home in keeping the home environment humming so that the whole farm is running well. It's really the center of the farm. But we can't all be farmers. But there are other solutions. I know an executive who just couldn't be with his family, and so he quit. What he was doing, he was making an awful lot of money, and his goal was to get home, start a small engine repair shop right in their garage. That's what he did with his boys, just so that he could be with them and he could teach them about work and business. I also know a man who quit work as a politician to start a family restaurant with his children, his wife and his children, so that they could work together every day. And both of those experiments were really successful in terms of drawing the family together, and even in terms of economic prosperity. They worked. And somehow there really is an interesting combination of talents when you get the talents to come together in a family. It really is amazing how well these can leverage each other, and what you can do together in one family business. You can make way more money than you could if you all scattered, got independent jobs, and were working independently of each other. So some businesses that you may be thinking about, maybe dreaming about, your dream business, may not be viable this year and next just because the economy is so different. Everything is different. The economy is broken. But other business ideas that you may come up with as you survey the landscape, they may be really viable. They may be really profitable. But whatever you do, your children can be an asset in what you choose to do. One of the greatest lessons we learned through home education was this. It gives you so much flexibility all through the year. And there's nothing that better socializes children for maturity, for poise, for social awareness, for the ability to get along with people than home education. Because if you involve your children in real life activity every day of the week, your children are just continually being exposed to the real world, to people of all ages, to situations of all kinds. They're discovering why all these people are all so interesting of all ages. It's not just like the public school environment where they lock you into an age-segregated little system with your peers, and you're supposed to dislike everybody else and only hang with your peers. It's not like that with home education. It opens up broadly new vistas every single year. One of my little daughters, who loved to go with me, met numerous congressional leaders, Middle Eastern ambassadors. She met royalty when she'd go with me places. And she also knew one of the founders and deputy directors of the CIA. I took her to his home one day when she was 7, when I went over there to help him and his wife get caught up on some yard work. So I drove the big tractor with a bush hog, and my little daughter rode with the chief on the lawn tractor and learned how to drive it. And he just loved having her there. And she was just such an asset in every way, as she always was. On other occasions, she and I also visited people in poverty, extreme poverty, in the Appalachian Mountains near our home. And so our children learned to interact respectfully with people of every background. And that's what we want, isn't it? But better training. I mean, this is basically, home education is just not about the 3 R's. It's about interpreting the world for them and interpreting life for them, introducing them to life, an understanding of life, what they really need and what they can get in so many better ways directly from parents who really know their minds and their hearts. So you might ask about me taking my children into these places. What if there was a disaster? Wasn't it risky to my reputation to take such young children into such important meetings? Yeah, it was a risk. But over time, and I didn't really know what would happen. It was a risk, and I knew it was a risk, but I wanted to be with my children. I wanted to show them what I was doing. I wanted to explain to them why I was doing it. I wanted them to see some of the good guys and the bad guys that were around there, so that they could see, yes, these are real people. But what actually happened in my doing this, it actually helped my reputation, my professional reputation over time. And I wondered why this was until people started telling me. So many parents, and many of these parents who would talk to me, and the parents who were watching me, they're in such continual warfare with their children. They don't like their children. Their children don't like them. They're continually defeated by their children. They're afraid of their children. They don't know how to lead their children and be close to them. And that is, as I grew up as a young father, it was kind of startling to me to discover this about so many people. Even, these big dynamic leaders, world leaders, national leaders, they couldn't control their little daughters who were 4 and 5 years old. They didn't know how to do it. So once my colleagues saw firsthand that I appeared to be at least somewhat successful in leading my children into maturity and respect and happiness, well, they apparently believed that I could be successful in about everything else. And that's how it helped me. And so how did my wife and I do that? And my wife gets pretty much all the credit for this, okay? The main thing that we did was really quite simple. We built a lifestyle that would require us and allow us to spend every single day together doing real life things with our children. I mean, that's as simple as it is. And we wanted them to learn so much about life and character. We didn't sweat the academic stuff. We believed that it would come. And I'm going to talk about more of the academic history of what happened in our experiment with homeschooling. It worked. I mean, they learned what they needed to learn, even though we were focusing on these other things, real life and personal character. The academic stuff just came along with that, and it came along with it really well. They really have not been shortchanged in anything except some exotic languages and a few things like that. So the tedious things we got to do with them, the hard things, the challenging things, the things that we hated to do, the things that we loved to do, they got to see how we responded to that. And so this is why I started a business that I could run from home, that I could be at home to run. And it was not to make more money. It was not to be my own boss. It was so that I could be with my children and they with me before they were off starting their own families and businesses. And it happens so fast. Try to be with them as much as you can before that time comes. And let me just say that when we were starting out, parenting was a big mystery to my wife and me. And I didn't see how it could possibly be successful because there was so much I didn't know about it. So many mistakes I was making with my children. I didn't know how it could work unless I could really be around my children a lot, to work with them a lot as they grew up, to try to, fix the mistakes I was making and try to reorient them again, get them back on track, get myself back on track and move forward. So back to your question, did I take them into work? Yes, I did. I took them to the work that I created, which we could do together, whether it was in a downtown urban environment or whether it was home on our rural little small hobby farm. And it was really a good adventure. So now is the time, with this huge upset in the economy, to take a really good hard look at your new options. Maybe, things are happening that are going to force you finally to make the decisions you've always been wanting to make, to be more independent. If your job is evaporating, it's made a decision for you, hasn't it? You then need to get your feet on the ground and figure out, what are you going to do with your family? Maybe both you and your wife will be out of work. Maybe both of your jobs evaporate. And so you'll need to be starting. Well, first of all, don't wait or depend on other stimulus checks to just come in and carry you along. You will need to start one of those more creative new businesses that the world really needs. And I don't even know what to suggest here, but I do know what's needed in my own community. A farmer's market for all the new garden produce that's being produced. Summer crops and even winter crops. There's a lot being produced. There's really no good way to sell it to all the other people in the community who could organize that. Like I mentioned, I think every community will need these small little online school rooms for kids whose parents really cannot take them to work and who absolutely do not want them to go back into that system. And I think we need I know we need this in our community, a creative market for livestock farmers who cannot really get to slaughterhouses. We need some of our own personal, local slaughterhouses to handle those animals. Okay, now that's just my community. Be thinking creatively. What do you need? your neighborhood needs a neighborhood watch. Is there a phone app for that? If not, maybe one of your children could write that and sell it, as a marketable item. I would buy one if there was one out there. Try to start something your children can help you with. And until then, try to get all the time with them you possibly can. And here's a question I know is going to come up. How do you train young children to be obedient and respectful to others and interested in life so that you can take them to work and not be totally embarrassed by their conduct? So I will be planning to get into that. Send me your questions. Continue to send me your questions. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll try to get to everything we can as soon as we can. Thank you.